guys, it's Baileywiki, and it's August 5th. It's now release day for August, and it's 2024. We've got a ton of new stuff. I've got some amazing new mass edit updates, things you can do in mass edit now that are pretty killer. If you're going to work with regions, I have a tutorial out, full tutorial on regions that came out today with this release. I recommend checking it out, seeing what mass edit can do for you if you're going to be working with regions. But there's also new linking functionality and other things that are pretty groundbreaking stuff. We've also got all sorts of new assets. Just to talk about it first for the first time is Dungeondraft. We have almost 2,000 assets, tons of equipment, swords, axes, maces, shields, armor, lots and lots of stuff, even potions and other things. Those are available to Dungeondraft, and many of those are now in Foundry as well. So Foundry got a huge influx. Check the changelog for all of the new assets, but there is a ton of them, as you can see. All those assets and everything else went into a dungeon expansion, so we have new dungeon rooms, and all those rooms are also available as necromantic themed rooms using the decor items from the Necromancer release. And you can add those items to lots of other kinds of dungeons in my different dungeon sets. So you can kind of make everything look Necromancer if you want to. But I'm excited about all that stuff. On the 3D front, we have a bunch of new artists now. We did our most recent contest. We ended up bringing in all the winners of that contest to the design team. We have an army of 3D designers. And as you can see, there's a lot of really good new scenes coming out. They are really innovating at breakneck speed. You should watch what they talk about on Discord. I mean, they are, inventing the space as we go. Lots of new technology solutions that they're bringing to the table, and just really fun maps at the end of the day, as you can see here. Lots of new props coming out as well to help those of you who like to make maps rather than just play maps to be able to do that too. Now, just as a heads up, we did have to commit to V12 finally. We're not doing V11 and V12 support. We just don't have the resources to try to redo hundreds of everything under V12. So if you're not on V12 yet, you want to use this content, I think you have to update, or I think you have to update to use it. But at this point, we've been in V12 a long time. Foundry's there, it's stable. We've got most, if not all, of the modules are supporting V12 now. So it's a pretty good time to make the move if you haven't already. So with that, let's jump into how to find all the new content. Okay, so in terms of where to find the new content, as always, just update all of your Baileywiki stuff. You're going to find updates in Nuts and Bolts, Mass Edit, Towns, and the Dungeons modules primarily. But just hit the update all button, you should be good to go. As usual, if you open up Mass Edit, once you do update, you can refresh your, regenerate your index if you'd like to do that, and it should give you all the new stuff. If I go to the All tab and I just type in new, I will see a list of all the new things, the new brushes, which there's tons and tons of equipment, treasure, all sorts of other things, and then even all the way down into keep going further into the virtual directory, you can see just all of the new tile assets that came out in this release. The new scenes, of course, are all under either your 2D scene compendium or your 3D scene compendium. So to start first with Mass Edit, there's been some really cool stuff with the Mass Edit system that was introduced here over the last month if you've been watching the changelogs. First one is if I hit Shift Q, it brings up this Mass Edit linker menu. And this is a new way of creating prefabs and connecting entities without using tokens. And if I just double click, I can create a new link and I can start linking things to it, or I can create an asset and link things to that asset. I'm going to give you a full tutorial later. I just wanted you to know it exists. You can read some of the documentation, watch some of the videos on the Mass Edit page, and you get an idea of how you can create stuff. But like all the stuff on the screen was made with Token Attacher. There is a point where we'll start making things with this Mass Edit linker system as well. It's really cool and intuitive. It's got special things that it does, and you'll be seeing more of that here as we go. But also introduced, and I just did a full tutorial of this, released it today, on regions. And Mass Edit now introduces a new functionality for regions, a new behavior specifically. And when you open it up, create a new behavior, there's a couple of things like spawn and despawn presets. So when a player or players walk into an area, you can actually have it spawn a preset that could be a token or a series of tokens or a whole building or a boat or whatever. So you can spawn and despawn presets, but it also gives you this link token function. And this is super nice for creating vehicles. And we'll be retrofitting all of our boats and other vehicles with this functionality here, probably by the next release, not for this release because it just came out. But you can play around with that, make your own vehicles using regions as the primary way of sticking tokens to it. But I recommend checking out the tutorial to see how it works in detail. It also gives you the ability to size and move regions, which for some reason is not a core thing of regions, but now it is. So if I have that region selected, normally you couldn't drag it around like this, and you couldn't hit Shift D, which is a token attacher function, and or excuse me, a mass edit function. You can resize those things. There's another region on this scene. You can see these other regions are just light regions. So anyway, that's another function of mass edit that is relatively new. You also have some new changes to key bindings. So let's say that I bring up a boat. There's our boat. If I hit V for vertical, it will mirror the boat vertically. Now, if I hit H, it'll mirror it horizontally. So you can just toggle vertical and horizontal. It's great if you've got like rooms like this that you want to move. So let's look at one of our new Necromancer rooms. We can hit the V and we've just mirrored that room now the other direction, or we hit A, we mirror it the other direction. So really awesome. Great work by Adif. In terms of nuts and bolts, there's only one kind of major update, and that's with the delete all control tokens. This had to change for V12. So if you are running V12, you want to update with this. Okay, so let's walk through the inventory first, and then we'll get into some of the sample scenes. So we've got a lot of new dungeon rooms. These are Necromancer based, and then we've got some that are sort of clean, right? So the way these are Necromancer based, it's all with tiles. So we just added some of these necrotic assets that you see here to scenes. And the reason I did this is so you could add these to lots of other rooms. You could turn any room or cave into, skulls and bones and sort of necromancer type of thing. We also have a bunch of portals and other things that you might find helpful. If you watch the Dungeondraft release, you'll notice that these walls are now showing perspective, right? So there's some slight perspective here on these walls. And because of that, it opens up the ability to do some new things. Like we can have a door that's lit on that wall, right? And you have, all the different doors on here. These are dark, so you can't see them, but you can have a door like this, create an egress point. Maybe I want to shrink that down a little bit on the wall, and it just lets you create egress points in other places. So if you want to create doors and other things that were not drawn into the original artwork, you can do that. You also have some overhead tiles. These are great for serving as portals or as doors, if you will. So, because they sit overhead, your players can go underneath them, and it's just a good effect. They're already built into those prefabs, but they also come separately. You can just look up dungeon overhead beams and overhead doors, put those into a brush. If we have spawning mode turned on, you can drop them onto your scene that way. When you're dealing with walls with perspective, you may want to cover certain areas. So we've got these also pillars in perspective. These are like corner pieces. You'll see these used a lot more in Dungeondraft to actually create some of these assets. Various stone circles, these are always helpful. A little bit more ornate platforms that you can drop in. And then you've got these dungeon stone holes, and they come in different varieties. So like this one, you can see the ground through it, but you have others that are just like a bottomless pit. So you can play around with which one you want to use exactly. Actually, if you look up stone hole, I think is what they're called, you can cycle through these with Control Shift and place them down. We also have all these brushes for animal bone piles and also humanoid bone piles. This just shows you some examples. There's actually quite a few new skeletons and bones in here. So if we just look up bone, you can see all these animal bones that are available. These happen to be prefabs and putting more bones together in one place, but you can see all of these human remains as well. There's a lot that you can do, and you can even really make some cool decor within scenes using some of these new assets. Got some new armored skeletons using some of the new armor and equipment pieces. All of the necrotic elements. It's definitely inspired by like Lord of the Rings. You've got pieces that make for good like overhead tiles and more decor items. You even have this piece of broken floor, which actually is semi-transparent. So it picks up whatever floor it's sitting on, but then it shows dirt underneath. You'll find that will be a nice thing to reveal things like coffins and other stuff. I'll show you examples of that. We have all these bone altars using a lot of these assets. These are very resizable because they're not necessarily implying any kind of scale, but these are just decor items, including this Game of Thrones inspired Iron Throne here. And they all come together to embellish these new rooms. And so these new rooms are set up in a way that you can mash them up together and connect them, and you'll see how we do that. But they come with a lot of these pieces already embedded, so it's ready to go. Here are those same rooms, but with all of the embellishments gone and the torches turned to regular torchlight, because you may want to make a regular dungeon, right? By the way, this one, whenever you see red tiles, it means it is colorable. So you could say, look, instead of red, I want just black in those areas, or maybe I want some kind of blue something going on, or maybe I do want like more of a green necrotic thing going on. So those are all options for you with that colorable piece. These are very large scenes. Just in terms of scale, right? Here's a player in scale to the rest of this scene. So you can have some really, really great boss fights here. And there's a lot of room to spread out and have a battle. And by the way, all those rooms can be found either by typing in dungeon room. You can add Necromancer to it. And if you double click that, you can drag it onto a scene, move it around, even resize it, drop it in where you want. Okay, now for the equipment and furniture release, you can see there's thousands of new pieces of equipment. This is a massive scene. If we zoom in on it, we can see we've got armor, we've got new sort of complete suits of armor, which can be guards, or they can just be posted up in corners for decoration. We've got all kinds of footwear, including metal boots, leather boots, bracers, gauntlets of different varieties, helmets, shields, both flat and then kind of from a perspective. Just kind of keep moving around. We've got prefabs for clothing, for all the new clothing pieces we have. These are things that you drop into like a closet or a seamstress or a tailor. Here's a bunch of new boots, pairs of boots, shoes, sandals, lots and lots of stuff. Tons of hats, wizard hats and adventuring hats, things like that. Lots of dresses, including dresses that are on mannequins, dresses that would be more like laying on, a bed or laying on the surface somewhere, including some coats that are kind of laying down as well. Lots of new potions. Lots of these are colorable. So you can make some green potions and other things. You've got potions that are lying on their sides. Lots of different varieties. Potions that are standing up. Tons of new wine bottles. Also wine bottles that are standing up, more for perspective. New treasure, gold chalices, coins. And you've got coin piles. You've got sort of your copper, silver, gold, and then kind of your mixed piles. And then you've got these really large piles over here. And these things just smash together to make, endless hordes of treasure. More treasure, some gold scepters. Then we've got new tavern furniture pieces. These are available as a brush, but there's a bottom, there's a top if you want to use it. You don't have to. These are things that you can just drop into a space to kind of quickly create a tavern. These things are all in Dungeondraft as well if you want to do your mapping in there. Lots of different wine bottle prefabs. So these are things that you can just drop into a scene, either decorate a room. You've got a little picnic blanket here. Some new, should actually be crates. These have hay in them in case you want to, I don't know, put some wine bottles in there or something else. Just didn't have any storage that had kind of patterned interior. And then we've got these prefabs for potions, so you can just drop in some potions somewhere if you want to make like a magic shop, scatter these around. Then, of course, we get into all of the weapons. So we've got various types of daggers, greatsword, long swords, lots of different varieties, short swords. And you can resize these things. You can call a short sword a long sword, things like that. You can scale them up or down. You've got weapons that are done in more of a perspective. So you can put these on weapons racks or leaning up against a wall. We've got spears and halberds. Here's some spears in perspective. Bows, quivers, crossbows, bows at perspective that you can lean against a wall versus bows that you might find leaning elsewhere. Arrows, maces from the top down and then from the side, axes from the top down and from the side. And then all of those pieces went into these equipment piles. These are piles that you can just spam in and just all of a sudden have a ton of equipment just in a particular scene. Putting them up against wagons, having them in armor shops, just makes it easy to use these things and drop them into a scene because you're always going to need to create some scenes with maybe some armor on display. Here's a bunch of weapon buckets, full of swords, lots of weapon racks. So all the weapons you saw up there kit bashed together into different types of weapon racks. These are all available as brushes. So if we open up Mass Edit, we go to everything. Just look up brush and equipment, for example, and you'll see all this different equipment, and you can grab multiples, add them to a brush, and then you can cycle through, whoops, if we set this to random, we can cycle through all these different pieces and we can kind of just like put, random equipment around a room. Here's your equipment piles. You can just cycle through and just really quickly add equipment to a particular scene, just as clutter or what have you. We also have all these brushes for coffins. So if I look up coffin, I have this one just for the lids, and the lid could be a full coffin. It just doesn't open, right? So I've got these different lids. There's lots of them. So if we look up working coffin, we drag one of these out. It's actually got a few pieces. The top, you can change the artwork for. You can move it and see what's underneath. It's also matte enabled, so you can click it. It will go transparent. To the users, the players, they'll just see the bottom of the coffin. For you, the GM, you'll see the top, or you can hover over it. Because it is an overhead tile, you can hide tokens underneath it. Okay, so in terms of the sample scenes, we've got a couple of fun ones. I wanted to go with some of these more like, set pieces, right? So if I drop in a player, you can see this is a pretty big map. The players can actually go underneath these columns, and it just adds more of that three-dimensional effect. This equipment is all just added as tiles, so you can remove it, swap it out. Even this pit in the middle is just a tile. But I wanted to create more of these set pieces because they're generic. They inspire a story. They can kind of go in any campaign, but you never know where you would find this. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to use it in a campaign. It's called Bottomless. We also have caverns under the Abbey. This is a set of caverns that players can navigate. This may be the egress or maybe the exit. Depends on how you want to treat this. This is just a light, by the way. You can always turn it off in case you don't want light pouring through that exit. Your players can make their way through this different areas. They can find a bunch of bones around this hole. They can go down. This is an overhead tile, making their way through these kind of old mines. We've got some random sounds that can play as they traverse it. Right, so that's invisible to your players, like you see here. But then it's a really good effect. This is from the Cave release some time ago. It just shows you how you can place some of these together. We've also got some fun areas like this glowing mushroom area. And your players, ultimately, they sort of corkscrew through until they get to this break in the wall, and now they're in this like basement area where they can either leave or maybe they're escaping from an abbey down into these caverns. The Cult of Stronghold uses a lot pieces from other sets. This is from the current set, right? So the idea is that this is maybe where there's equipment and downtime happening. But here's some other pieces where there might be some rituals going on. You've got this sort of like rotting pit with bones in it. You've got the forge with a jail, and you can rearrange these things yourselves. Here's a fighting pit. But just give you an idea of how you can use all these different sets together. These are all from the dungeon pack. So if you go into your token tab and you just type dungeon room, you'll get all kinds of dungeon rooms of different varieties that you can mix and match to make really cool stuff. Graves is a simple scene that's got a couple of graves that are mat enabled. So you just see the headstones here, but your players can come in and maybe they're trying to dig these graves up. You can dig them up, and these are all just separate tiles. So you can take the skeleton out, put something else in, but everything is just sort of a mat enabled, right? And it's all working on coffin 1 and coffin 2. Even the dirt piles are part of that. This is what I call the Necromancer Ancient Cave. Your players can make their way through this area, that break in the wall, and into this cave. There's a sort of a magical item floating here. It's an overhead tile, so we can actually change it to like, a mace, different kinds of maces. Here's a bow. Here's this sort of bone mace. And then behind the altar is sort of an additional area where maybe there's a cave that your players can find their way into. Maybe there's a big bad boss fight after that. Just stuff to give you inspiration. Here's the Necromancer Beast Room. Maybe your players come in through here. They've got this really cool kind of floating skull over this like bone altar. These are overhead tiles, these hands, so they really create a sense of claustrophobia for your players. Then you've got these cells within this room that's just kind of wrecked and full of bones. It's got a kind of a bloodied altar here. And then a secret passage to what is then this is a dark room, but it's actually filled with treasure. But these are tiles. You can switch the treasure out for something else if you're trying to tell a different story. Right? This is the boss fight room. That big room that I showed you earlier just added another sort of room from the same release here. And you might put some treasure back here, for example. Again, these are all just tiles that you can mix and match. This is using a laboratory from another release to say maybe that same necromancer, as you're navigating through these hallways, you end up at this laboratory where there's maybe something going on inside of these tanks. The bone altar I showed in the tutorial from today, but just a really great cinematic scene to have something crazy happening in the middle. This happens to have a kind of a ghostly armored skeleton hanging between these two pillars, but it's just a tile that you can move elsewhere. You can change this symbol out for something else. If you double click on it, you can see all the other symbols in the library. Feel free to pick something else that's more thematic for what you're trying to tell. You turn these braziers off like that. Anyway, just a real easy scene to have a fun boss battle in. And it does show you how you can use these things. Like these are just pieces. These hands, that skull, these are just decor items added to other elements. So feel free to come in here, turn on quick edit mode, and you can deconstruct this and see what all makes this scene happen. I like the throne room day and night. Here's the entrance to the throne room. It's very brightly lit. The idea is in the daytime. We can hear some great Michael Gelfing music playing. We've got some elevated areas in the corners where your players can enter into those. They can shoot here from up top. But it's got this other feature here where it's got the sun, and the sun is basically made up of 3 really bright lights. You can turn some of those lights on and off, but you can move the sun around and it changes the configuration of the light within the room. Now you can also turn all the lights off and go to nighttime mode. That'll basically turn the sun off, and now it'll start playing crickets chirping. And maybe this is a fight in the middle of the evening, or your players broke in to get to the throne. These are all tiles, though, so you can take that throne out, put something else in. And finally, the weapon shop is just another city scene using the spawner that you guys may have seen in past maps. So we took the empty shop and we just populated it with weapons, right? So these are all just tiles. You turn on levels. These are just tiles added to a generic shop. So you can make an armor shop or a clothing store or other things using some of the new equipment here. There's other top levels to this. There's a tavern upstairs and a place to sleep, that kind of thing. But just to give you an idea of how you can start to make your own scenes with some of the new equipment. So that's it for the 2D release. Next up is Swift to talk about 3D.
Hi guys, Swift here again to give you all a quick look at what we've got this month in the 3D side of the release. So let's jump into it. The first map I'm going to be taking a look at today is one from Severin. It's called Frosthold Fortress. And this is actually a multi-map series, starting with the fortress itself here, which is this exterior scene focused around this well-fortified keep up on a frozen hill. Aesthetically speaking, I'm always biased towards winter scenes. I'm not sure why, I just really like the snow, I suppose. And I think in this case we've got a great use of the surrounding height map to give the terrain around the fortress a little bit of definition. And then obviously we've got the snow shader, or the overlay shader, on a lot of the objects in the castle here to give the top of the ramparts and so on a snowy kind of covering. We've also got this functional drawbridge here, controlled by a lever over here. If you click on that, it'll ask you if you want to raise or lower the gate. So let us lower the gate. And that opens that up beautifully. So this would be a great situation for if the party is defending against a siege, or if they are indeed the ones besieging this place. You've got this functional drawbridge that can be pulled up or lowered down. The bridge itself being pulled up on chains by these rotating gears here. Other than that, we've got the courtyard itself, of course, with the stable and the piles of snow around the place. A little bit of decor there. I do like the fountain over there, looking like it's just frozen solid or overflowing with snow. And then we've got the fortress itself, with the 4 towers around about it. We've also got several maps for the interior of the fortress, so let's have a look at those just now. And here we are in the ground floor of the Frosthold Fortress. So you can see that it's the same rough shape as the keep outside here. We've got the central chamber, the throne room, with the 3 thrones, which could either be a trio of rulers or a ruler and then his chief advisors. And then in the surrounding areas, we've got various rooms here, like a dining room in one corner, a armory in another, an office over there, and a bedroom over here. And then we're using the shadow cubes here on the stairs to kind of more solidly give the impression that these do lead to another map. In this case, the upstairs lead to the upper floor here, and we've got downstairs over here that lead down into the basement. Speaking of, let's have a look down at the basement just now. And here we are in the basement, or perhaps more accurately, the dungeon. Currently, it's set up as a series of cells here. We've got 5 of them, all joined together. But something you could do relatively easily, we've got all these walls set up with these nice pillars and everything, these cage doors and so on. But you could just select these and remove them. Same with the doors as well. Just clear those out. And then you'd end up with a big open space that you could use for some other antics. I'm sure you can imagine there are all sorts of things that you could tuck down into the basement of a fortress. If this is the player's fortress, then I can imagine this could be a great place for a wizard's study or a fighter's armory, or just any of the many things that your players will want to get up to in downtime. Now that's the basement. Let's have a look now up at the top floor of the castle. And here we are up on the top floor of the keep here. This area is more sort of relegated to being a storeroom and a barracks type area. We've got several bunks over here, and then over on this side we've got yet more bunks, as well as weapon racks scattered around the place. So this is fairly sparsely furnished, but this seems to be the kind of place, or intended to be the kind of place, where the military of the fort would kind of be quartered. Obviously, you can adjust that as you like, but overall, I think this is a rather neat little series of maps here, a very functional fortress inside and out. All of these maps, of course, done by Stevra, so well done to him. All right, let's move on, and let's have a look at Violet's maps for a moment here. This one is called Sea Floor, which, as you can see, is a sort of canyon or reef sort of area down at the bottom of the ocean, complete with swimming fish and ominous large shadows being cast from something far above. It's really just a nice use of a kind of light blue fog and then a little bit of exterior terrain using our kind of sandy textures to create this barren seafloor environment. And then down here, you've got loads of space for all sorts of encounters that you might find at the bottom of the ocean, whether the party have been dragged here by some outside force or if you're running an undersea adventure. This is overall, I think, a very stylish map. And one of those that you could call simple but effective, because it is very straightforward, but it is also very sort of strongly thematic. And speaking of, let's look at the next one. And this is one that I quite like, called the Sunken Temple. A continuation of the last map here. It's another undersea location, a temple that has either literally sunken down here or was built here once long ago when this used to be above ground, or of course was built here by a subaquatic species. It has an interior, of course, mostly ruined, with a bit of a light source in the middle. Oh wait, no, that's just our friend here. Let's just remove that. And so this is a great kind of space for an important encounter, I think. You've got all these jagged walls with gaps and holes leaking light in from outside, giving the place a very sort of strong style of this ancient, barely standing ruin. And then you've got this large space in the middle here that's perfect for a boss fight or some other kind of important encounter. And then outside, of course, you've got things like the fish swimming around casting shadows, and the large creature that may or may not be visible. No, it doesn't look like it is. Overall, though, very stylish map. Oh, one other thing as well. It's a bit hard to see sometimes, but over on the right here, we've got this level slider that allows you to change where the entire level is being cut down to. Like if we set it to roof, for example, nothing changes. But if we set it to temple, then that cuts down everything above the roof. So we can see directly into it without having to use clipping or anything like that, which is rather nice. And then if we set it to basement, it reveals the underside of the temple, where we've got various cages, boxes, an old storage room, tables and chairs in the back here, the ruins of those who once lived here, or maybe currently live here, depending on the use you've got for the place. But yeah, I thought I'd point out this slider over here, because it's sometimes a bit hard to see, because it's quite low opacity. But yeah, overall, very stylish map. And this map is a rather interesting one, made by Letters. It is just called the Solar System, and as you can see, it is a map consisting of several planets orbiting around a star in this kind of nebula-like stylized background here, which is very stylish, I think. This is the kind of map that you probably wouldn't use as a battle map, but might be very nice for an informational scene, where you might kind of make these planets clickable and then give players information about what the planets are, or just more abstract scenes where maybe the players are on some sort of ship that can travel around in this map here to visit to the various planets. Either way, it is a pretty striking scene, and I do rather like it. Just the motion of all these planets orbiting around this star is pretty nice to look at, I think. So big props to Letters for this one. And speaking of, this next one is also from Letters and is called Docks in Slums. A much more straightforward map, a nice little highly detailed map of a edge of a sort of slum district with a couple of piers here over some water. This is the perfect kind of map for if you want to have a sort of smaller conflict between the party and some locals. Or maybe the party are the locals, of course. And we've got these buildings with interiors on either side. for a little bit of extra detail here, like this rather lovely scene in here with the flickering lantern. Or over on the other side of the street, we've got this campsite here with the fire, that's quite obvious. And then various beds and such inside these buildings here. Overall, it's a really highly detailed scene, which I quite like. And then it's also very straightforward, very understandable. So this is kind of perfect for any sort of tactical combat in any sort of setting, really. There's also a variant of this map. This is the Docks in Slums table version, and what they've done is they've taken one of our tables from the Baileywiki 3D module, and they've just placed it underneath the map. So it looks more like it's a diorama that you've got on a table that you're playing at, which I think is a pretty cool idea. Something I kind of like to explore more often is making scenes look like they are on a table that you're playing around. Because I think that's a very interesting way to look at 3D VTTs like this. Since at the end of the day, having something like Virtual Dwarven Forge with a brilliant VTT like Foundry attached to it is a really appealing kind of idea. So I think this kind of simulating a real table is pretty nice. Well, let's have a look at the next one. This next one is another lettuce map, just called The Encampment, and this is a very large map, as you can probably see. We've got quite a lot of tents surrounding this central area here, lined up in rows. A very obviously military kind of army encampment site we've got here, with plenty of detail around the place as well. Like we've got a detailed storeroom over here, stalls with food, tables with food and drink on them, even a field for some sheep. And then things like a smithy, an archery range, a stables off in the corner there, siege weapons. It really is a full-featured sort of map we got here. I can imagine this being of great use if you had a sort of mid-level campaign going on, and the players had decided to do the traditional start an army and start taking stuff over. This would be an excellent opportunity for roleplay scenes, or of course, any sort of combat scenes, if an enemy manages to attack the camp. Overall, though, very cool map, so I definitely do approve. Well done to Letters for that. He's also got another variant of this one. Let's hop over to it. And similar to the last one, this is the encampment with the table on it here. So again, it's sort of simulating that the whole scene is a diorama you've got on a table. And I think that kind of adds to it. It's definitely one of those things that I find kind of appealing. Wouldn't really be appropriate for all types of campaigns or all types of scenes, but it's an idea I definitely like, especially for things like this. So that is the encampment map. Now, this map here is a rather extensive one called the Fallen Titan, which is by DigiDM. It's a really sort of intricate map we've got here. We have this gigantic Titan thing split up into various pieces here, and that's mostly because it actually has an interior. If we scroll over here nearby it, we can see it's got some scaffolding up the cliff here, up onto its chest, but it's also got this scaffolding over here and a ladder that leads inside. So if I select a player token that I've got inside it, we can see that down here in the pelvis of the creature, we've got a kind of storage room, various barrels and crates and so on inside it. Then if we go up a bit here you can see the main room that the players would end up in if they clambered on inside. We've got a map desk with maps and scrolls on it, of course, more barrels for storage, and another ladder heading further upwards. On the next floor up, we've got some improvised sleeping quarters here with a couple of bedrolls laid out, and a kind of see-through crystal over here. As you can see, we can kind of peer out through it. This is the kind of thing that I can imagine developing over time if your players take it as a base. For example, if they come in and set up a bedroll and then later on they construct proper rooms and beds and so on inside it, and another ladder upstairs some more, and that ladder leads up to the head of the creature, which has various chests in it here. Obviously it's one of the harder areas to get to, so it might be a good place to store your treasures, though the gaps in the helmet here look a little bit large. Over on the other side there's one last staircase, and at the top of the staircase with the visor of the Titan as a sort of overlarge window, we've got one last room up here with a sort of bedroll and chest going on. So overall, I could see this map being used for many different purposes, really. We've got this really kind of intricate base inside this giant Titan that's presumably been here for a very long time. There's also a version of the map without any furniture in it, but it's the same map, just with no furniture. So you can decorate the inside as you like, whether the players are taking it or if it's been overrun by orcs or bandits or been taken over by a necromancer or that sort of thing. Overall, though, a exceptionally cool map from DigiDM this month. This next map is one by Dr. Albie, and it's a rather straightforward scene here. It's the Forest Hill Monoliths. So as you can see here, we've got this circle of standing stones up on the top of the mountain, surrounding this flat stone in the middle. And then it's on a bit of raised elevation here, using a bit of the height map terrain. This is one of those maps that's very straightforward and very playable, I think. I think the general concept of a map that's focused around a central point that is important in some way is the kind of map that is useful for a wide variety of campaigns. I'm sure you can imagine all sorts of reasons why the party might be interested in what's going on at this stone circle up on top of this hill. Overall, very simple but effective. Relatedly, last but not least, from Dr. Albie again, we've got the Swamp Monoliths. This is a similar idea to the previous one, though obviously there's a lot more monoliths and a lot more swamp going on. We've got these stones etched with arcane runes glowing faintly in the middle here. And some of these stones have sunk into the mud, or perhaps they were always at that height. A green mist hangs over the whole map. This is another one of those very flavourful maps, but since it's still in the broad category of a central point that is of interest for some reason, I think it's quite useful for a very wide variety of adventures. Overall, like I said, I really like simple but effective maps like this, especially with little details like, say, the plants down here in the swamp water or the fish swimming around, using the orbit shader. A very nice little bit of map here. Alright, that's a quick look at the maps for this month. Now let's have a quick look at the props that we'll be adding. So last month we got some good reactions to the forest set that we'd given out, but it was very stylized, and people were saying that they'd like to see more realistic content. So this month we've got a similar idea. We've got another forest set with various variations on the trees and so on, but they're all sort of textured in a realistic style. So we've got bark that looks like bark, leaves that look like leaves. Everything's very sort of realistically proportioned and realistically coloured. We've got the kind of spring, summer, autumn, and winter variations. The spring and summer obviously are just different shades of green. I think it's really cool to take these two kind of shades and mix them together when you're making a forest, because a little bit of variation in the shades as well as the shapes of trees really makes a forest kind of up the next level. We've got these large trees. As you can see, these are actually like 3x3 almost. And then also we've got these smaller trees over here, which is a similar idea. We've got the spring, summer, winter, autumn. You know which ones I mean. And then just kind of much smaller trees all the way down to the tiniest little saplings. Similarly, on the foliage front, we've got a little bit of detail foliage down here. Some ferns, which are always nice. And then also some clumps of grass, which look a bit odd against the white floor. But add these to a grassy terrain map, and they really kind of add a nice little bit of detail here. We've got large clumps like this for covering larger areas, because these will be more efficient than using the small pieces. But you could also add these small pieces to structures or buildings or the gaps between paving stones or that sort of thing to really add a little bit of colour to an otherwise grey scene. Speaking of grey, we have various rocks and stones over here. These are, again, textured in a kind of realistic style, and these are designed to be able to be kind of joined together, just mashed together in random shapes, to cover up pieces of terrain or to create cliffs or even caves, depending on your situation. Always love a good rock. They are the multi-tool of any map maker's arsenal. Got some very large ones, some medium-sized ones, and some very small ones, again, for detail work. And then a couple of very flat ones that are more to kind of show that something has been worn down and eroded away. So you could put these stones on top of it to look like it's been worn away enough that the stone underneath can be seen, or that perhaps it's broken over some stone. And then over here as well, we've got a similar idea. Large patches of kind of gravelly stone. These are good for like rubble or things along riverbeds or riverbanks even. And we've got a smaller one and a large one, but the texture density is the same between them. So you can use this one for larger areas and then this is for smaller areas. No need to scale them and end up with differently sized textures. And then the last thing we've got are these things you've probably seen in the background here. These are the fire trees, and we've got these in the same kind of colours. We've got the spring, summer, autumn and winter variants. And these are very, very low poly, very, very efficient clumps of trees that are offset so that you can put them a very far distance out of the map and not have to worry about the edge of the table, for instance. And the idea with these is if you use the height of the scenes around here, and then you put these trees dotted around the place, then from a distance, they look quite convincing, like a forest. Up close, they aren't so convincing because they are literally just flat plains with textures on them, but they're very, very efficient, so you can use absolutely loads of these and not worry about your frame rate too much or things stuttering or lagging or anything like that. That's another one of those tricks that I think is quite good for getting a map to the next level. Just a little bit of detail off the map, if you're using a map that has like the terrain around it, just to kind of improve the situation with that a bit. So overall, we've got this nice new forest set in a very realistic style that I quite like, and hopefully you'll find it quite useful. As ever, we appreciate comments, questions, anything like that regarding the 3D stuff. You can drop them down below in the comments or on our Discord. And thank you again to all of our map team guys for making the maps these months. They are looking absolutely great. But for now, I'll hand you off and see you next time.
Okay, for Dungeon Draft tiers, check it out. There's over 2,000, almost 2,000 assets in this release. All the stuff that we covered before, from different types of equipment, potions, bones. There's even more bones than you see on here. There's so much of it. You've got new kit bashed furniture. By the way, you can come in here and see this stuff is kit bashed together from other pieces, and then I made prefabs out of it. So when you see this little symbol here, it means here's a prefab. You can go see the object info and know where to find it. So a lot of these components then went into prefabs of those components, right? So like these suits of armor were all prefabricated together. You can see how they're built and build your own. But here's an example of one. So these are the kit bashed ones, and then here's what it looks like when it's all put together and made into a single item. These are all kit bashed, so you can rearrange these, add more stuff to it, and then resave them as your own images. So really fun stuff to work on, and just shows you how much you can do with all these different pieces. You can deconstruct how these elements were made, make new ones yourself. These bones really go well, these skulls go well together in a way that you can, really make them look like they're kind of larger at the top and descending into the ground, kind of surrounding walls. These are great toppers. Lots of fun stuff there. You've got new floor patterns. You've got some really white ones that you can turn into lots of different colors. New metal pieces. These are all objects. These are all embellishments. This is kind of taking the shape and breaking it up in different ways so that you can put them into dungeons in ways that sort of add this carved stone kind of look. These all work really well as overhead tiles that you've seen before. We've got these special doors. These are for perspective walls. So the big thing with this release, the new thing I should say, is these perspective walls. You can kind of see the edge of the wall here. I spent a ton of time trying to perfect these and really get these things to work well together. So there's some things that you need to know about these walls in order to kind of use them, right? So we'll go down and look for one of these. We'll grab this one, for example, perspective 2. Let's get rid of our beveled corners. If I just draw this wall, you can see that it actually ends in perspective as well. They actually have end pieces. Just these 3 have the end pieces. The reason I did that is I wanted to be able to do this kind of thing. Whoops, draw that over. See how we have those set up? Well, they also butt up to each other. So you can create this nice corner and make them kind of make sense that way. These walls also work by doubling them up, right? So now I've got a wall where I've got perspective on both sides. So you'll see in a second how I use these, but it's pretty effective, right? And so if I want to place a door in the middle of one of these, I can't just use a regular door. I can't just do that. That looks weird, right? You can, and probably most often want to, just use a gap. It makes its own sort of door here, right? It makes its own archway. I did add some of these. You may like those as well, but for me, really just kind of adding the gap makes the best kind of door for my purposes. Now, I do have a bunch of other doors that I can add on top of it. and we'll show you in a second how I end up designing with those. But I really like the look of these, and it really does a lot from a design perspective to be able to use those. Those same walls are actually also available in paths, because the paths you can resize. So these may look like walls, but they're actually paths. I also showed you in some other places, but you have these covers. So you may, when you're working with these perspective walls, you'll get some weird kind of looking walls like this. So I made these covers that are colorable. You make them any color you want, and they're meant to go over those gaps so that they kind of hide, right, some of that weird looking stuff, and you can just have these kind of perspective pillars around there. You can see what these are called: Stonewall, Dungeon, Perspective, Corner, Colorable. But you can see how all of these different rooms were ultimately designed, where the assets came from. But this is great. I mean, I really like this ability to see the edge here. It really kind of makes it look like a real space. You can see I've doubled up the walls here, so I've got them on both sides. Colored some of these. Some of these patterns are colored and made darker. But I love this look, right? This kind of quasi perspective look. I think it works super well. I think it's unique. It's new. You know, this room really feels like you really feel like you kind of seeing more of the room. So come in here and again, check it out. Maybe it gives you some inspiration on what you can do, and feel free to modify these and make these designs all your own. Okay, so that's it for the release. I hope you guys like it. I hope you enjoy playing with all of your new weapons and equipment, and all your dungeons and everything else that came out this month. Let us know in the comments what you'd like us to work on next, and if you have any ideas for a mass edit and things that we're doing there. And in the meantime, thanks everybody for supporting us, supporting the channel, and supporting all of our content. Hope you have a great rest of your month. Come find us on Discord and say hi. And in the meantime, have fun making your maps.